Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back once again to our vanilla Minecraft world, and obviously we're over here at our Mega Taiga village yet, and I want to work on this project just a little bit more today. So, last time, as I'm sure you recall, we cleared out an area, smoothed out the terrain a little bit, and built a couple example structures to show our build style. And that's all well and good. You guys seem to enjoy the project idea and like where it's going to go, hopefully. But at this point, at this early stage of the village, it's kind of hard to tell where to go next. Like, I have tons of stuff that I could build just willy-nilly, wherever I want to put them, but eventually that's going to lead to problems. So I think that at this stage, before we really dive into things, we should really take a moment to try and plan things out. Now, I'm not the type to plan things out super specifically. I don't want to try and lay out the footprint of every single building and plot out where every single little change is going to go. But what we can do is try and lay out the basic paths, like the main routes at least, so that we know where those are going to go through. And then along those, we can try and plot out at least a few of the major buildings, so we know where some of the big stuff is going to go, and we can kind of focus on that area going forward. So that's going to be a good first step. After that, I'm probably going to come back and try and focus on some of the details and work out what we're going to do with some of the kind of aesthetic additions to the village area. Stuff like the trees. Like I said last time, we're probably going to want to build custom trees in this area, and I still don't really know what style we're going to go with for that. So maybe we'll experiment with that a little bit. Maybe we'll try and figure out what the paths themselves are actually going to look like. But all of that's going to come after the planning stage. So I'm going to go get to that, try and figure out at least a pseudo-okay layout for the village, at least for this early stage of it, and then I'll get back with you guys and we'll work on some of the more interesting building-related things. So I think I've made a decent amount of progress on this as far as planning the village goes. The yellow terracotta blocks are meant to represent our main pathways, the main roads that are going to go through the village, and these are big enough, or will be big enough, to support things like horses carrying carts and stuff like that. So they're going to be the most worn, the most used, and the largest paths in the village. Off of those, we have some orange paths, and those are going to be kind of the secondary routes, the places that are traveled almost exclusively by foot and maybe a little bit less frequently. That's going to be reserved for going like up cliffs and stuff like that, or winding around backs of buildings and stuff like that. You know, they're going to be major pathways, but not like super critical backbone of the village type pathways. And then, of course, we're going to have a bunch of other smaller paths coming off of both of those to lead to specific buildings, to lead to the houses, to lead to the shop type houses and stuff like that. So that's our pathways. I did also put down a few little light blue pillars, and these are meant to represent buildings or structures of some kind. Now, some of them are defined and have a definite, like, this is what I want here. Others are kind of multiple choice, and some of them don't even have anything associated with them yet. They're just kind of there to say, hey, I want something good in this spot. But that's what I've plotted out so far. Let's actually go ahead and take a look through this very, very briefly, just because I want to show you kind of where I'm thinking of taking the village, and I want to get your input on it. So here in the middle of the village, or the middle of the area we have so far, there's a bit of a convergence of paths, and this wasn't intentional. This actually just kind of ended up happening, but we have 5 different pathways all kind of meeting in the same spot. Now, I don't know if we want to do something special with that. I don't know if we want to have some kind of build in the area that signifies it's an important intersection, or if we just want to merge the roads together and try and make it look as natural as possible. That's something we'll probably figure out when we're doing that and we have some of these paths figured out. But if we go ahead and take the eastern route up the main road, that's going to wind up through these trees and over this pond area and stuff like that. And don't worry, obviously we'll be doing tons of landscaping in order to make all of this traversable and nice looking. But eventually it leads to this little kind of, I don't know, an alcove? Is that the right word for it? It's a kind of a sunken area with high ground all around it. And this area feels really cool to me, and it feels like a good spot to end one of the main roads. So whatever we put here does have to be important for the village, and it has to be something big and cool. But I'm not entirely sure what that's going to be. I'm kind of thinking a quarry, just like a little quarry, because that would feel cool with the high walls and then the deep pit. But I don't know how that would go being so close to the village. The other alternative is the dining hall, which is going to be a relatively large build, and I think it would do well here. But we'll see how it goes. I have to figure that out. So then we're going to backtrack. And we're not going to go down the orange paths right now, just because they're kind of, they don't really lead to anything specific, while the kind of yellow ones lead to the critical parts of the village. But if we go all the way in the opposite direction, we can follow this one back to our beach area. Now, I'm not entirely sure what to do with this quite yet either. I do know for a fact that we're going to be removing the beach aspect of it. I do want this to be more of a jagged stone cliff style coastline. I think that'll match the build style a little bit better, but I don't know if we're going to want to go ahead and do something like a dock or a pier, obviously not for giant ships, but something for small cargo boats or small fishing boats. That might be kind of cool, but I'm not entirely sure if we'll go that route or not. Again, I'll have to experiment with it and probably do a little bit of research and see how practical it would be in a scenario like this one. So then we can go back to our middle converging area, and if we go over in this direction, this is where I think I want the entrance to the village to be. It just kind of works for it. I wasn't really sure at first, but I think now that I've had it in my mind for a little while, I think this is a perfect spot for it. So eventually we end up at this river, which I definitely want to work into the build somehow or other. It's just kind of a nice thing. Obviously it needs to be cleaned up and the terrain needs to be reshaped, but this is a nice big river for us to work with. And I think that having a bridge going across to the other side and then continuing the path out of the village would be awesome. Because there are a few things I want to do in the general biome around us. Certain builds and certain things tied to the village and other kind of unique things that are related to it vaguely. I think that that's going to help the build a lot too, even if we don't see them all at the same time. So I like that idea a lot, and I think the entrance is going to be very cool in this spot as well, because it's going to give us some interesting looks at the village as we walk in, and it's even got some spots for some builds I wanted by the entrance. So that's perfect. And then there's one last main pathway that goes out down this way, and I don't really know what to do with this one quite yet. It's not perfect. It's a very, very hilly area, and there's kind of a problem with that. There's a few builds that I really need a big open area to work with, and I still don't have it. So this area might be one that we massively redo in order to make certain other builds work with. For example, a farm building. I would really like to have one that has a large field for crops and a large area for animals, but it's really hard to find big open areas. We're kind of using the only one that we have nearby for our central area for our village. So that is the main layout. Obviously, I didn't go into detail about all of the specific buildings, but again, those are kind of in flux, and I don't know what's going on with those for sure yet, so I'm not going to try and make any promises there. But in general, I think that this is good enough as a layout to continue on and work on some of the other details. Now, the first thing I want to do is work on the path a little bit. I want to try and figure out what path style we really want to go with for all of these. And there's a few different options, so I'm going to try and do those. And probably at the same time, I also want to try out a few different tree styles. Now, we're likely going to stick with the coniferous style tree, just so it matches the mega taiga, and I feel like that's quite appropriate for the area, but there's definitely a different variety of those. There's quite a few different ways to build something like a pine tree, or a spruce tree, or a hemlock, or anything like that. So I'm going to try out a few different styles, probably in a few different sizes, and I want to see what feels good here. So I'm going to go do those two things, and I'll get back with you guys with the results, and we'll see how we feel about them in this area. So I've created a few things for the sake of example, including some pathways, which is what we're going to look at first. Now, do keep in mind that these are a little rough looking because they are temporary and I'm going to have to tear them up, but they should at least convey the idea. So, the first style that we could go with is this stone and gravel type, and as much as I like this style of pathway, it's not what we're going to use here in the village. It's just got a little bit too much contrast, it stands out a little bit too much, whereas the dirt kind of blends in and looks good. And this one also doesn't really make sense in the context of our village, which is honestly the more important part. It just doesn't make sense for a village like this one to go through all of the trouble of getting gravel and stone and carting it all over and laying everything out, and it's just a ton of effort, whereas dirt roads basically create themselves just by people using them. So we're probably going to go with something dirt-based, but definitely not like this one. So the idea here was that we would have wood planks going across, and this is something that was pretty commonly done back in medieval ages and earlier, and I think even these days on logging roads they do stuff like this, where you put wood across and it gives you kind of a point to grip if the road gets too muddy. So I really like the idea, but in Minecraft it doesn't really work too well. At least on a kind of curved road or a sideways road like this one. If you're going straight it works okay, but here, not so much. We could just mix the planks in as a general building material, and that's a little better, but honestly, I think it's just too much chaos. We have so many different material types going on here, with the coarse dirt and the regular dirt and the concrete powder and the planks and the carpet and the farmland. It's too much. It's just a little bit too much going on. It feels kind of chaotic. So, I don't know. We're probably not going to use planks. We may use them at the transitions of height, just so we have slabs so we can go up and down, but I don't think that we're going to use them throughout the entire pathway. So if we remove those, the path starts to look a little bit more like this. And this is close. I think if I spent more time with this style, it would look better. So we could have like bigger mud patches rather than just little sporadic ones. The carpets, I'd probably tone down a little bit, though I do still like having it in here just for the sake of having this little stick trick where you have a sign down and it pokes through and it looks like a little stick on the pathway. I don't know. I kind of like that, but it's also super straight, and I'm not sure that it looks good. But it's an interesting detail. I wish we had spruce signs so that would look a little better, but it's an interesting option. So I kind of want to keep it, but we'll see. But if we did want to dumb down the road a bit and kind of remove all of the details from it and just have a basic dirt road, it would look something more like this. This is just 3 different materials, not cutting grass, I suppose. And the end result that we're probably looking for is most likely something in between this and this. Because this is a little bit chaotic feeling yet, but this doesn't feel quite detailed enough to me. This feels just a little bit too bare, even though it looks fine. It's just, I would like a little bit more detail in it. Just a few little mud patches or something like that. So that's probably what we're going to do. That's where I'm leaning, but I would love to hear what you guys have to say about pathways and what we could try out. And, of course, there is also the pathway block in Minecraft itself, but for a big pathway like this one, I don't think this is going to work. There's just not enough that you can really blend with it, if this is the main block. The pathway block itself blends with dirt okay, but the other way around, it's just way too much contrast. The oak planks work really well with it, but again, we just don't have enough detail to work with for our main pathway. So we'll probably use these for minor paths, things that lead to houses and stuff. I didn't say it this time. So that's the kind of style that I'm thinking for our pathway. Some kind of dirt with a little bit of detail going on. So be sure to tell me what you think about that. And now we can talk about trees. Now, I will say that before we move on with the trees in this area and before I start building a lot of them, I think we need to dedicate an entire episode someday to just going around the world and building a bunch of custom trees for the sake of practice. Because that's something I've been meaning to do for a long time, so I get better at building trees, and I still haven't done it. And I think I have to force myself to do it. Because it would help a lot to really know what I'm doing when it comes to trees. But I think they turned out okay, all things considered. This is actually pretty much the exact same style of tree that I designed in Revelation Episode 2, which was pretty much the first time I've ever built a giant pine tree. So I guess this is just kind of my base style for them. And I think it looks okay. It definitely does the trick. I wouldn't mind if they look like this in the area. This one looks almost the same when you first look at it, but it's actually quite different. The style with this one is that all of the branches and the leaves are on individual layers. So you've got a bottom layer, and then the layer above that, then the layer above that. And this is something you frequently see with types of pine trees. So I wanted to try that out, and I think it looks okay. I think that works relatively well. I don't know if that works better than the other style, though this tree looks kind of ugly from this angle, I realize. But I don't know. I kind of like that. I think that turned out okay. So we may go with that style for the general trees in the area. I did also try adding a few details to this one. I added in some birch leaves to add a little bit of extra color, which I think that works out pretty well in this biome. So that's good. We'll have to see how that looks with the new textures, though. I'm a little worried that the new texture pack might kind of break that. We'll have to see. I did also add in a few dark oak fences, which I'm normally not a fan of this trick, adding in fences to convey branches. But I think in this scenario, where they blend in really well and you barely notice them, I think that it actually works fairly well, as long as it's not overdone, which we need to be careful of. I did also add in a few note blocks, which is kind of a weird idea, I admit, but I thought that they might look like pine cones, and honestly, they almost do. They almost work. I feel like they're just a little bit too light and probably a bit too big for a tree of this scale, but they do almost work. So I don't know that we'll continue that, but I do think it's a funny idea. Anyway, moving on to our next tree. This one's a little bit different. This one is made to look a little bit less full, a little bit more barren than the other ones. Thinner bits of leaves or needles, whatever you want to call them. I like that a lot, actually. It doesn't look like a super happy tree, but I really like it as a detail. It's probably not the main type of tree we'd go with, but I think I definitely want a few of these around the area, just to give it a little bit of variation so that not every tree is super full and lively looking. And on that note, which, there's actually a few other things I might want to try with that. I just interrupted myself, but when we have the new bark blocks, for example, that's going to look way better. Just a random thought, because we see so many of those logs with this style. Anyway, on that note, as I was saying, there's this tree. Now, if you've ever been to a pine forest, you probably know what I was trying to do. A lot of the time, pine trees have a little bit of foliage. Do you call it foliage with pine trees? I don't know if you do, because they have the needles. Well, they have a little bit of their needles up at the top, and then the rest of their trunk all the way down is pretty much barren. They might have some dead branches, but that's about it. And I wanted to try and see if I could get that style to work too, and honestly, I really, really like that. So that's another thing that I think we're probably going to have around here a little bit, but I don't know about the size. I wanted to try and make a tree that was particularly large and see how that went, and I actually like that a lot. I like that we have a really, really big tree. I don't know if we're going to do a lot of trees in that style or only occasionally have one that's that big. I mean, keep in mind, we could go way bigger. This is only half the size of a real-life California redwood tree, so we have plenty of room to go up if we want to. But I think a tree like this one, this is about 50 blocks tall, I think. I like that scale, and I like that style. So that's another one that we'll probably have some of, maybe not a ton of, but I really do like that, and I want more of that. So that's my ideas so far for the trees and for the paths, and I hope you guys will kind of come at me with your own ideas for that, because that's kind of the point of today's episode. I really want to have a lot of this stuff figured out before we really set to work on our village. Now, I did want to try and get a little bit of work done yet today on the village, but unfortunately, I am very, very thoroughly out of time. In fact, I'm already a full day late on the video, and yeah, it's not good. So I'm going to have to end it here, unfortunately. And next episode, we're probably going to do something else just to break it up a little bit. But next time that we're over here, I think what I want to do, and this plan could change, but I think what I want to do next time we're over here is take care of our entire main pathway system. Whatever pathway design I end up figuring out as the one that we're going to go with, I want to try and get that to all of those yellow blocks that we plotted out today. And maybe even the secondary ones as well. We'll see how things go. But I do want the entire path system, at least the base of it, to be done next time we're out here. Maybe work on some trees, maybe add a bunch of buildings in, and hopefully make some really significant progress, because I know we kind of didn't actually get anything done today, which I feel really bad about. I hate doing that. I usually like to have tons of progress, but it was important that we got a lot of planning done and a lot of the details figured out and stuff like that. So I just said it again. Arg! Hate myself. Anyway, that's going to have to do it for today. Now, before we go, I do want to give you guys one little update. For those of you who do not keep up with Minecraft stuff religiously, because I know a few of you have brought up the 1.13 overview and Minecraft 1.13 in general. Minecraft 1.13 has been delayed. It was very, very close to being out. It was within a couple weeks going to be released, I think. But Mojang has decided that the technical update isn't quite good enough. So what they've decided to do is combine 1.13 and 1.14 together. So instead of getting the technically updated update and then update aquatic afterwards, we're actually just going to get update aquatic, and it's going to have all of the technical stuff along with it. So it's going to be one really, really big, super duper awesome update, which I'm quite looking forward to, but it also means it's probably going to take a little while, which is kind of a bummer because I really need those log blocks. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say. So hopefully you guys are looking forward to that update. It's going to be quite a while now, I fear, but it'll be worth it, I'm sure. Anyway, I have to go for today. Like I said, quite out of time. Sorry that we didn't get a whole lot done today, but it was important to get the planning and stuff out of the way. So next time we're over here, we'll try and get a whole lot done and make some serious progress. For today, though, I'm going to have to call it here. So thank you guys for watching. If you have any ideas for pathways or trees or anything else for our Mega Taiga Village project, be sure to tell me. And, well, that'll do it for today. Thanks for watching, have an amazing day, and I'll see you guys next time.